Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Alcohol Trends and Holiday Preview with WSWA. I'm Michelle Cosmo, the President and CEO of WSWA. Today, we are joined by Dale Stratton, SipSource analyst and industry veteran, who has a strong reputation for his useful insight and understanding of the beverage alcohol industry. Thank you so much, Dale, for your time today.
Thank you, Michelle. Excited to be here.
And coming to us from Dallas, Texas, we have the acclaimed Sly Cosmopoulos, who is a master mixologist and the current director of Beverage Marketing at RNDC. Sly brings a tremendous creative marketing and business skills to the wholesaler tier, and we're so glad to have you as an active member of WSWA. So Sly, great to see you.
Thank you for having me as well. It's going to be a great session.
It will be. And there is so much that we want to cover today. I know you will all benefit from this hour, especially with the unusual year and the uncertainty ahead of us. So let's get started. Dale, let's open it up with reviewing the 2020 trends and what's been happening. I know you've brought a few slides, as you always do, to help us tell and understand the story.
Thank you, Michelle. And we'll go through these and ask Sly to jump in where she sees some good openings to discuss the trends and really what it means on the front line and out there on the streets. And today we're gonna do a quick overview on the top line, but we're gonna dig into the on-premise. Since we have Sly attending here and her expertise in that area, we want to make sure we leverage that. So we're going to spend a fair bit of time diving into the on-premise. This slide, pretty standard if you've seen these presentations, 12-month rolling numbers, and SipSource data is 12-month rolling. So that really gives us a very good view as to what's happening over the long term. And you can see here that going out to September, the end of Q3, spirits are doing very well. The top line represents total spirit growth, that's at 5.3%. The middle line represents the combination of wine and spirits, which is growing at 2.4%. And then some good news for the wine category. And the wine category has moved into positive territory for the first time since September of 2018. So 2 full years since we saw positive trends in volume in the wine category, growing at 0.1. Going back just real quick, we see that disruption that happened February, March, and we know what happened there. And we saw that jump up in replenishment based on the panic buying that the consumer was doing. We saw a little bit of a correction there in April and May, but we've seen a really nice upward trend of momentum for the category. And both wine and spirits showing that momentum. So really very good news for the overall wine and spirits business. Going to the next slide. What we do know, though, is that there's some tough times out there. Slide on the left represents spirits. The slide on the right represents wine. And as we look at that, this is broken into quarters. So you're looking at numbers Q4 on the left over to Q3 on the right. And you can see the immediate channel shift that did occur. When the initial shelter-in-place orders came out in mid-March, and we'll talk about some regional differences, you saw an immediate shift where the on-premise really has taken a tremendous hit, and it's getting tougher and tougher for that channel every day. But that volume has been offset quite nicely on the retail side, and you can see that on the retail side, spirits are growing at 13.6% in depletions, and the wine category is growing at 6.1%. Next slide. I'm going to do a little bit of explanation on the next slide. And from another engagement I do with the Wine Market Council, this is data from a company called Civic Science, and they do online polling of people. And they've been asking this question ever since the start of the pandemic. And it's very simply, how soon from now would you be comfortable doing? And you can see that on the left-hand side, this is going back to work. Shopping in stores other than grocery stores, eating out in restaurants, going on vacation, and attending large public events on the far right. And that first bar represents people who are ready to do it right now. The blue bar represents people that are ready to do that activity in 2 to 5 months. And then the green bar represents people who say it's going to be 6 months or more before I'm ready to do that. So as you look at that, the key thing to look at here is that while we do all the things that we have to do, and certainly those of us in the industry are working very hard to support the on-premise, the overall consumer just by and large is not ready to do that yet. And certainly going on vacation, going to a large public events, these are headwinds for the on-premise in general. The data here was through November 10th. And as I've watched this data on eating out at restaurants, there's a very clear correlation between the number of new COVID cases reported and people's willingness to go out. And those numbers in parentheses represent the change from a week ago, and that data was ending November 10th. So you can see that people have gotten less comfortable in some ways, but I believe the announcement of the vaccine pushed that 2 to 5 months up. But the end game there on that is that the consumer will decide when things reopen, no matter what we try. Next slide, please. So this slide represents, and this one is for spirits, the next one will be for the wine category. And this is a month-to-month look, 12-month rolling numbers that talks about the split between the on and the off-premise. So going back to December, you can see that 18.6% of all depletions were done in the on-premise, with the remainder done in off-premise. You can see the immediate slide in what has happened, where fast forward to the end of September, at the end of this quarter, it's now down to where the on-premise is only accounting for 12.1% of depletions. Going at the rate that we're going, and I did figure in a little bit of a bump on the anticipation that we would see a spike in COVID heading into the winter months. It's going to be at the end of this year that less than 10% of all depletions are likely going to be done in the on-premise. Next slide showing us wine, even smaller for the wine category, where we're getting down to that and looking at it by that 14.8% over there in December. And by the way, the split between these two is a number that moves maybe 10, 20 basis points a month, but very, very solid number. And we can see that by the end of December, we would anticipate that only about 7.5% of all depletions will be done in the on-premise. Next slide. Another thing to keep in mind is that regions matter. And as we go through and we look at what's happening regionally, it's not all the same. States and regions have opened up differently. We look at this from a standpoint of the census regions and break SipSource data into these regions: the West, the Midwest, the Northeast, and the South. And what I've done here is looked at on-premise only and what was the change from the previous month. So those March bars represent the change in trend from February to March. The second one under April, that represents the change in April from March. So as we go along, what we saw early on was a very, very consistent drop by region. You can see that in March, it was a 3.3 to 4.3% drop. In April, where things really shut down, you can see that the range in those percentages gets pretty tight. Minus 7.8 being the lowest loss from the previous month, 8.5 being the most. Interestingly enough, with the South having the biggest hit. However, as we moved into May and June, we saw different regions handling things different states within regions. And we know that the Northeast really got hit hard early, especially New York, New Jersey. And as we look at that, you can see that the trends from April to May and from May to June, the Northeast really took a bigger hit and was in worse shape. Where the South, which was opening up a little bit more, some of the big markets down there, they actually were faring better as they went ahead. In July and August, we've seen those numbers begin to come back to a bit of a flattening as things in July and August were largely opening up. In September, we see it widen a little bit. I would anticipate that in October and November, we'll see more diversity as we go in there and some variation on region by region. To me, this is a really important thing to watch as you start to manage your business. Next slide. So a couple of slides just looking at spirits, and this is again September ending data. The bars represent the share by these categories, and the markers connected by the lines represent the trend change. So as we look at this, there's a number that really does stick out here, and that's prepared cocktails, that 45.8%. And we've seen just unbelievable growth in pre-mixed cocktails. And certainly as the consumer moves their cocktail experience from the on-premise into home, we are seeing just a tremendous amount of growth in those pre-mixed cocktails. It's quite varied across the spectrum from a price standpoint, but certainly the big driver there seems to be smaller sizes, likely cans and single serve. But the other categories that continue to do well, U.S. whiskey, tequila, and also brandy cognac. And that brandy cognac is really largely driven by cognac, which has been doing well. It's interesting that as we look at the high growth categories in the spirit side of things, there really hasn't been a change in the four products that are included in that. For a good period of time, it's been U.S. whiskey, tequila, cognac, and cocktails. However, the order has changed as we've moved forward with that and looking at what that looks like. Next slide.
Dale, before you go on,
yep.
Can we clarify on the cocktails, the prepared cocktails that you have here, that you're indicating those that are sold commercially and not the cocktails that are sold by restaurants and bars for takeout or delivery?
That's right. Those are pre-packaged. This is purely pre-packaged cocktails. And I know Sly, as we were chatting yesterday, we talked a fair bit about how on-premise, and actually, why don't we go to the next slide? How on-premise operators are changing what they do and how they're adapting to their current situation of being really forced into doing a lot of delivery and having to do a lot of to-go cocktails. And as we look at this, the interesting thing here, so this is looking at those same categories, but ranking them for on-premise only. And you can see that tequila really, really dominates, and the level to which tequila moves, and it moves from the number 3 spot up to the number 2 spot. Just in the last 3 months, we saw tequila actually pass rum as the 3rd biggest volume category. So tequila moves up 1, cordials move up 2, the Irish whiskey category moves up 4, and gin moves up 1. But the things that stick out here to me also are the trend on cocktails is down only 11.7, where we know that the overall number is down over 30. So people are using those prepackaged cocktails more in the on-premise, likely. But then the other one, tequila is only down 24.8%. Compared to the category in the on-premise being down 31.4%. So as we look at that, that tells me that you're likely have a lot of people out there that are batching up margaritas and on their to-go menu are using the margarita as a go-to drink from a batching standpoint.
And Dale, for this, I know people are wondering too where seltzers fit in, because that, of course, in so many mindsets is part of that pre-mixed cocktail. So if you could talk to that, I think it would be helpful.
You bet. So anything that would be identifying itself as a spirit-based seltzer, and it's important to think of that it is purely a spirits-based, would be in the pre-mixed cocktails. That's the category that is going to go into. So those would be showing up there. Of course, we're not capturing malt-based cocktails, so we're not looking, the White Claws don't have any influence on that. Those are malt-based, and those stay in that segment of the business. But Anything that is spirit-based would be showing up in that. There are wine-based cocktails that are out there, or wine-based seltzers as well. Those would show up in the wine category that we'll look at next. Are there any other questions out there?
There are actually, another question is, it's so interesting that the big conversation right now among the chat is really all around these cocktails. And I think because of the SipSource data, there's a lot of question about what we see in this data. And so one question that's come in from Alex Brick is about the on-trade cocktail kits. So if on-trade accounts are selling bottles along with the premium mixers and a garnish, how are these categorized?
Those would fall into, and we have a segment that's called gift packs, would either go into that, or they would go into the, and more likely are going into the base category of what that is. If it's a tequila, it goes into tequila. If it's a whiskey, U.S. whiskey, it's going to go into the U.S. whiskey category.
Perfect. Thanks, Dale. Sly, did you have anything? I thought,
I was waving my pen. No, I was going to say, a lot of these are great points, and I was going to let Dale kind of finish up his slides, and I've been taking some notes, and then we'll kind of dive in a little bit deeper into some of those, and then a few call outs on my end. So all great questions, but we'll get into a little bit more detail in just a little bit once Dale finishes. Yeah.
Great.
And I do think, I think there should be a lot of conversation around cocktails and the pre-mixed cocktails, because I do think that that's a trend that's going to have stickiness, that's going to stay. And we'll put it out there that we're going to talk about this in the future, and I think that they will play a role once we get back to a more normal environment. This slide to me, and this is just looking at the categories and looking at it from the standpoint of, from February to today, ending September, how has the share changed on these? And going into this, when we first looked at the data, March ending, I had very strong concern for tequila and cordials, because of their heavy leverage against the on-premise. Knowing that on-premise was going to be a struggle, I was worried about those categories that were heavily leveraged against it. But clearly, tequila and cordials have done very well here, and have done very well in the on-premise on a relative basis. It's important to remember that nothing is doing well here. Being down 25%, hard to believe that anybody would see that as a victory. But tequila has gained 1.1 share, and that's huge. You don't see those kind of moves over this sort of a time period very often. And I do, again, think this speaks to the batching that is going on in the cordials. Probably have some triple sec in there, some other things that are going into that those cocktails that are going out and being used either batch or individually. Also, I would say that when you look at this from a price tier segment, the tequila category is on the popular level. The entry level has a much lower decline than other segments. Where you start looking at this by price tier, the tequila category on the popular segment is only down 19.1. So that tells me also that on that entry level, people are batching up a lot of margaritas and getting those out the door. Let's move on to the wine category. Oh, one more on the spirits. And I do think it's important to remember that we will get back to something similar to normal. And that as we look at this is how the trends in the on-premise stood at the end of February, before we went into all this. So the pre-mixed cocktails were doing well, growing 8.1%. Tequila doing very well, U.S. whiskey doing well, but also Irish and cognac, they were doing well. So as we look at this and we think back to when we come out of the other end of this, what is it going to look like? I just wanted to put a slide up there to remind us that we will get back to something that is normal. This is what it looked like then. It's very difficult to predict what it will look like at that point when we get out there. But certainly some of these trends will carry through and continue. Now looking at wine, and the first thing that I would say about the wine category is that there's been less variability between categories and categories that have changed. So as we look at this, the specialty category, that includes is going to include pre-mixed wine seltzers are going to fall into that. Sauvignon Blanc has been hot, remains hot, growing 9.5%. The balance between the imported and the domestic is almost exactly the same. Both domestic Sauvignon Blancs and imported Sauvignon Blancs are growing at a very similar level. I'm going to go over there and look at sparkling, and we're going to talk about sparkling pretty heavily on the next slide, but you can see that the sparkling category is down. Within that, though, Prosecco remains good news. The Prosecco category is still growing at 7.3%, but as we hit the next slide, what we see here is the strength of sparkling in the on-premise. And if we go back to February, Chardonnay was actually bigger than sparkling in the on-premise. So when we look at that sparkling category, the sparkling category as a whole, so that includes Prosecco, Champagne, Cava, and every other sparkling wine. And as we look at that, it's in share, it gains 3 spaces. So we knew this going in and was similar to the way we were with tequila, that worried about the sparkling category and knew that it would be disproportionately impacted as we went into the on-premise, because the on-premise is so important to the sparkling category. But you can also see here, as we look at this, the sparkling category gains 3. Pinot Noir gains 2 spaces. White blends gain 1. Rosé goes up 1. But in general, as we look at this, the trends between these types are closer. It's a tighter band. There's less variability in the wine category on percent change in general than there is on the spirits category. Next slide. And as we look at that from a share standpoint, you can see that these numbers, again, are quite abbreviated. Those have come down quite a bit and are definitely more tighter. A half point here, Chardonnay. Oh, my colors got reversed. The Chardonnay is a half point over there, and you see red blends and sparkling growing. So the right side are those that are growing with sparkling gaining share, and red blends also gaining share, but a tighter band. Next slide. As we go to what it looked like in February, here you see Chardonnay being bigger, and the things that were growing. The sparkling category was doing very well, up 3.6%. Sauvignon Blanc was doing well then, it's doing well now, 2.9, doing better. And the rosé category was really hot also, right? Growing almost 6% over there with really good solid growth. That was then. We'll see what happens at the other end of this, whenever that is. But gives us a good overview as to what's happening in the on-premise, and I think sets us up well to have a discussion with Sly.
Yeah, and Dale, to go off the wine trends, I've seen some slides where sangria is up. So from a beverage marketing standpoint, I always look at insights from the front door and back door, and a lot of people that work with me know that I use that reference a lot. Look at insights. Okay, what is trending? Of course, we want to push those, but from a beverage marketing standpoint, we also take a look at the varietals that maybe at a decline or maybe that need a little push, so we can help drive that category. So how can we present it in a way, whether it's to-go cocktails, offering it with sangrias or wine-tinis or what have you? How can we push that category? And then also going off your sparkling, I also took a note that Mentel, about 28% of consumers choose what they want to drink based on the time of day. And I think that can also go into the cocktails to go. So when we're creating, which we are going to dive into a little bit deeper when we talk about cocktails, but when we're offering these, what about those Saturdays, Sundays, and lunches? If 28% of those consumers are choosing what they want to drink based off the time of day, then we really need to make sure getting and building those to-go platforms according to what that consumer is looking for during those specific time periods as well. So, go off that before we start summarizing the other slides for you, but I wanted to add that in about the wine.
Great ad, and certainly sangria can come in many forms, and the base that is used in that, and even pre-made sangrias, and certainly on the retail side, pre-made sangrias are seeing that. We're also seeing some pretty good growth out there on the retail side on wine-based margaritas. And really being agave wine based, small base at this point in time, but something that certainly is going to be a factor as we move ahead.
And one of the questions that people are talking about too is that specialty and specialty wine. Is it wine-based cocktails? They'd like a little more description on that, Dale.
Yeah, and so specialty is probably the easiest way to think of it would be to say everything that is not a table wine, a sparkling wine, or a sake. So you've got desserts in there, so port, sherries. The big grower overall, which we'll probably talk about, is vermouth. So while it's a fairly small base, that's where vermouth goes. And this is another point of evidence on consumers moving their cocktail experience out of the on-premise and into the home, is that we've seen a very, very big spike in vermouth sales. I would say that there likely is never been a point in time in history where more households had a bottle of vermouth in them than right now. The other interesting thing that I looked at as I looked at that by size is 375s of vermouth are outpacing the growth of 750s. Not in the on-premise, but over on the retail side. So consumers are experimenting with it. They're bringing it in, but that would be another area that is driving growth on that specialty area.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Dale, as well, I think a lot of consumers even make possible to those lower proof and going back to European style cocktails. So as much as we are going back to classics, I think a lot of people also are going back to lower proof style cocktails and having vermouths and such as that typical base as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, hadn't thought of that one.
There's a lot of questions too about packaging format, as you talked about that. And one of the questions that came in was specific to sparkling on the question of whether 750s versus 187s versus cans. What does that look like in your data? Yeah,
so the 375s of Prosecco are doing very well. Huge growth rate. Everything that I would say though, everything that I say about 375s should be caveated with off a small base in the wine category. But when you look at it on the 375s, it's pretty tight. It's a pretty tight group. Chardonnays, Cabernets, Pinot Noir, and Prosecco. Those are really the varietals that are driving that growth in 375s. The other package that we did see early on, we saw a bit of a rush to large size. We saw that on the spirit side with 175 growth, as well as 3 and 5 liter packages in the wine side. That's abated a little bit with the exception of 3 liter box on the wine side. 3 liter boxes continue to actually do very, very well. In the on-premise, the one thing I would say is instead of thinking about it from package, there's a bit to think about there on price segment. And so 40% of the entire sparkling category in the on-premise is done by popular priced wines, popular priced sparkling wine. And Sly knows all too well about bottomless mimosas and the champagne brunch where you don't pay for your beverage. Consumers respond to free. Consumers respond to that. And so when you look at the volume that is being done at that entry level price in the sparkling category, it's significant. So that is one of the things that, as we think about what's happening in the on-premise from a sparkling standpoint, that really moves the needle, and that's the one that's really very, very much gonna make the difference. You know, on champagne, 7.6% of the category is luxury champagne. And that's where we saw a really big hit, because that is in the on-premise, that business just hasn't been able to sustain itself. It has been offset at retail, as we're seeing really strong growth in the retail. And we're seeing that where it hit a low, champagne was down 5.2%. I think that was in May. And it's now down 1.5%, I believe. So champagne is coming back and gaining momentum. And certainly as we head into the holidays, that's important for champagne sellers.
And if I can add to that as well, I think there's a huge opportunity for those, 187s and smaller sizes as we go into our second or third wave, whatever you want to call what wave we're in currently. When we're trying to communicate safety, there have been a lot of conversations, and what does the new wine menu look like? If you're going to communicate safely, do you want to have those bottles of wine that have been handled a couple times? Sometimes you have the cork on it, sometimes you don't, that's by the glass. Does a customer walking in, or if you're communicating safety, do you want to offer some type of 187 smaller size to where it's specific for you? You open it, it's minimal touch point. So again, I think there's a lot of opportunities in the future as we talk about wine lists and safety. Safety is going to be a key word as we go into 2021. As you saw, with the graphs, you still have some that feel very comfortable going to work in large events and dining out. You're still going to always have that smaller segment that's still going to be a little bit timid. So I think in the future, those smaller sizes do have big play as we communicate safety and what that looks like on a menu. And if I could real briefly touch on a few key points that I think Dale are key. Some key takeaways are spirits or wine are continuing to gain momentum, whether what's lost on one segment is going to be made up in the other segment. And I always tell people all the time, and they hear this from me, during the holidays, people that don't drink will drink, and people that do drink will drink more. And I think we found that out during COVID, right? You have these consumers and these stay at home and people working from home. And I think we're finding that you're having these consumers that did not drink that are drinking, and those that always have drank are drinking more. So I kind of find that relatable. And I think sometimes when we're seeing, okay, why is this segment up a little bit? We're also kind of including some consumers that typically aren't drinking that are adding to that retail number as well. And then looking at the spikes, the premixed cocktails, the cocktails to go, tequila cordials. Of course, we always want to take a look at these categories, and if they're selling off premise at retail, our minds are constantly going, how will that affect when that consumer walks back into a restaurant or bar? How will that make the back bar look differently? How will that make the signature drink look differently? And it's a big joke now, right? When you're sitting at a bar, we're already starting to hear people sitting next to us go, well, that's not how I do the pour at my home. So definitely, a little bit of what the consumer's buying at a retail standpoint will definitely dictate their expectations when they do decide to walk into a restaurant or bar. Pre-batch cocktails on tap. We're definitely seeing the word home tender that was, we were saying it 10, 11, 12 years ago from a retail perspective. We're seeing it back now. But, with the RTDs, like I say, don't underestimate the because they're cooking at home more so now than ever before. We say when we elevate a beverage program or when we create a signature cocktail list, we have to elevate the bartenders. And I have to say the same, the consumer's elevating their skills in the kitchen. They have more time to cook at home. I think they're being a little bit more complicated. They're being a little bit more daring. They have more time to cook. And so I always say, don't underestimate the consumer, because that's a great opportunity for them to experiment with the cocktails and ingredients that they're using in their kitchen. How can I pair it and what have you? So I always say, don't underestimate those consumers because they're getting spoiled at home. And I think regional differences is a huge, huge, huge topic. But how do we look at regional differences and apply what makes sense in those markets? You know, we were fortunate as a company to not or have any layoffs. So you have different legalities among different states. We had state presidents, sales reps, managers, you know, coming to us, looking to our insights team to provide what are the differences in the markets? What are the legalities in the markets? Help us make sense of this, you know, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. And so our corporate, you know, trade marketing and insights team was able to give us those insights. So we could take a look at market and what each market was in the phase, like some are still shut down, some are in phase 1, some are in phase 2. You have legalities that are different here. And we have to take a look at those regional differences and what are those consumers looking for? So we very much have to take a look at those regional differences as the needs of the consumer and our customers are going to be varying significantly with that. So we were able to use our boots on the ground, our sales reps, our mixologists, our craft specialists, our managers, our state presidents to be able to give us that feedback. So when we as a company build corporate, you know, tools such as our COVID playbook and things like that, we're able to pull resources corporately and customize specifically for those markets and for our key suppliers in those markets. So, you know, taking a look at those regional differences, we definitely should take time to take a look at those because that's definitely going to dictate what our customers are looking for. And Dale, when you said you know, our customers will dictate when we open, I think that's 100% true. And it's a waiting game for us. And all we can do as resources and as distributors is to just prepare for that recovery. Listen to when the consumers are back, but looking at those that still feel safe and others that don't feel safe, which we'll get into in a little bit. Michelle, I know you want to dive into to-go cocktail menus and what have you. But we have to make sure that we're capturing every single one of those components on a drink menu. Those that are comfortable walking in and those that aren't comfortable and those walking in but walking out within 5 minutes. So we'll touch on that a little bit as well.
Actually, why don't you go ahead and touch on that now, Sly? I know people are asking those kinds of questions. So,
as far as to-go cocktails,
right. There's a lot of questions about to-go cocktails. Lots of people are wondering, you know, what's happening. There's certainly questions. And Jake, maybe if you could pipe up and talk a little bit about the landscape in the states for what's authorized for to-go cocktails. I know people are kind of wondering, is that going to be permanent? How big is the footprint really across the country that we see for those to-go cocktails? And then it's questions about how do we plan for to-go cocktails and servicing that as it continues to increase. And some questions specifically, Sly, I know you're good about this, and just thought processes on pricing too.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the on-premise world as a whole has been challenging. I think the biggest one that we've, you know, seen is really our national account realm. As well as much as our local accounts. And I did get with my corporate mixologist, Trey Jenkins, and he focuses on national accounts. That's a key priority for him. And how can we still be at the forefront of national accounts, large regional accounts, and making that consumer feel safe? And, you know, and how do we implement these programs with a no travel ban to where we can't travel, what have you? So we did have to implement processes that no other distributors are doing that still allows for a visual storytelling that makes up for that restriction of face-to-face. And, you know, the first thing everyone thought of was, okay, to-go cocktails. And everyone was celebrating, going, we've been waiting for this. This should have been done. New Orleans has had to-go cocktails and drive-thrus. Why have the rest of us not been able to do that since then? But it's definitely a big future. One big mistake, I was on a lot of conference calls in the start of the year. And I think a lot of people, and again, I was talking with my corporate mixologist on this. I think a lot of people thought that we were going to get out of this a lot quicker than we were. First thing was to-go cocktails, and they were grabbing whatever vessels that they could find. We saw some that was an old fashioned, you had 8 ounces and it was put in a gallon. And so people were just kind of doing it. They weren't executing properly, which we'll get into because I know that was one of the questions that someone has asked for. But, you know, the laws are changing and we have to be aware of what those different laws are. And according to Data Essentials, about 48% of those consumers are interested in cocktail kits from the restaurants that they're those on-premise locations that they are visiting. They provide a unique experience to consumers to bring their favorite drink home. If you look at RTDs and those premix, you know, if it's skyrocketing, they're already drinking premix, and it's just an expansion, a little bit more craft version of to-go cocktails. But I think a lot of people thought we were going to come out of it because a lot faster, because I was on a lot of phone calls where some suppliers were saying, I really don't want to get into go cocktails. You had some that were buying bags and just kind of putting them in the market. You really do need an execution plan. How much are you going to batch? I say own every aspect of the menu. All the suppliers and in our brands, they still want that signature cocktail for the customer walking in their front door. But, you know, I give this example all the time with PF Chang's. You have a little pepper above the name of that food item, and you instantly know that that's going to be a spicy item. So why not own the signature cocktail for those customers coming in? They're drinking it, they're enjoying it, and you have a little symbol that offers it. You can also get this to go that serves 4 to 5. Pre-batch those those cocktails. That's a huge thing when we're saying, what does the signature cocktail menu look like? How has that changed? You know, we're minimizing it. It's definitely minimized. Mm-hmm. You know, pre-batch a couple cocktails, offer it as a signature cocktail, and that's going to be your to-go cocktail. Whether you choose to pre-package it before and you have its own separate refrigeration, and you can just offer it, or whether it's a 2-second process where it's pre-batched, you put it in the to-go, and then you offer it. So that way you're not having to wait 10, 15 minutes for that bartender to make a serves 4 to 5. So right. I tell suppliers all the time, you want to own every aspect of that beverage menu. It's incremental dollars, right? It's not going to be the driving force that's going to keep your lights on. But again, you're speaking to the customers that feel safe walking in. And you're also speaking to the consumers that are wanting to take it to go and enjoy a crafted RTD and, you know, a cocktail that they're familiar with.
That's really smart. Sly, do you have a different pricing strategy that you recommend for to-go versus on-premise cocktail, like that they'll enjoy on-premise?
Yeah, exactly. The pricing strategy should be the same as if you serve a pitcher of 4 to 5, right? Mm-hmm. You definitely should price accordingly. You know, at first a lot of them were 375s, and then with the non-alcoholic ingredients separately. But you can still maintain the same margin that you might make off a single drink. It's just multiplied by 4 to 5. You know, serving 4 to 5 people.
Right.
You know, one big thing is, you know, according to Data Essentials, 96% of consumers say they feel safe ordering a sealed to-go cocktail. And so I think that speaks big to, you know, again, safety is going to just be a key word that everyone just needs to tattoo it somewhere, because it's going to be a key word that's going to roll into 2021.
Right. No, that's interesting. And one of the interesting questions that came in was about how bartenders are adapting to the RTD boom. So as there's an increase in that desire for RTD, how are bartenders approaching that?
You know, we created some resource videos for our accounts. And, you know, one of them was called The Thoughtful Bartender, which really puts focus on what does behind the bar look like and how are they communicating safety to the consumers, you know, that are at their bar top or coming in. Because we've got one opportunity for these customers to feel safe. If they walk in and they don't feel safe, they're not coming back to that specific restaurant. So, you know, with that being said, we are leaning on RTD. We still want to give the consumer, you know, what they're enjoying, but it also means leaning on non-alcoholic, partners as well. How do we maintain the integrity of the cocktail while still giving a cocktail that has different flavor profiles? So in our different training videos that we as a distributor have created for our concepts, it is, you know, instead of using fresh rosemary or thyme or basil that typically, you know, you would have to hand touch and tear on the shaker, why not use a fresh, you know, thyme rosemary concentrate? So we are leaning on our non-alcoholic beverage, you know, partners such as American Beverage that has fresh fruit purees, Monin that may have some fresh herb, you know, concentrates. How can we lean on those in order to still, you know, unique outside the box flavor profiles maybe for the customer, because, you know, everyone wants least touch points of contamination for their cocktail. So we are very much depending on our non-alcoholic beverage partners. And that goes into the simplicity for the bartender as well. Right. I think bartenders are kind of being retrained of, you know, handcrafted or what have you, that you can still have a handcrafted cocktail while still maintaining and using premium ingredients to just take the place or supplement.
Right. Well, that's great. One of the other questions that came in is on the adaptability for consumers on QR code menus. Have you seen any data on that? Or do you think that they're going to prefer to go back to those printed menus whenever normal arrives?
No, I think to go, we were actually the first distributor of choice to actually start touchless menus. So we have spot menus. So with that being said, I think they'll definitely have a bigger play in 2021. It was our way to give support for our on-premise accounts to offer a touchless menu solution. It's a great way for those accounts to offer a safe and sanitary way to just instantly view those menus. It's compatible on any smartphone. The account, it gives flexibility to the account. They can upload unlimited menus. They can set menu display changes. They can at any time. We partnered with Brand Muscle in order to execute that. For about 60 days, we were the first distributor to actually implement it. We were figuring out the tweaks. Of course, you're going to have some hiccups, speed out. The consumers are looking for, our concepts are looking for, buyers are looking for. But Brand Muscle is able to add capabilities, which allows us to add capabilities such as wait lists, making reservations through this app. I know currently we have about 4,000 accounts that are signed up, about 12,000 digital menus that have been created, a little over 14 million menu uploads. But when you break that down, that's about one digital menu per second during restaurant or bar hours. When we take a look at what's going to translate into 2021, it's definitely, it's still going to be spot menus. I know that Brand Muscle is expecting 100% growth rate from where we ended 2020. So their goal is about 10,000 accounts, next year. So definitely it'll continue to grow. We're still going to have that older segment, right, that may not feel comfortable with technology and downloading. So able to do printable menus and such, but it's also, it's still, spotless menus is a way for us to still keep in touch with our accounts, our suppliers, and the distributor, and making sure that we're still, helping control, the beverage menu. But it definitely will have a huge play in 2021 and will continue to grow.
That sounds great. Yeah, Dan.
One thing that Sly pointed out there that I think is going to help the touchless menu is the flexibility on the operator side.
Yeah.
And when you think about that from an operator standpoint, chances are on the other side of this, people are going to have a much smaller range, that you're going to have fewer selections. They're going to have to manage inventory much tighter.
Yeah.
And that gives them the flexibility to have their menu change day to day, much easier, and gives them more flexibility even during the night. If you run out of something, it's gone, fine, take it off the menu. So I think that and thinking back in terms of what's going to drive that, the flexibility, I think on the operator side is going to be a big asset that's going to help drive touchless menus.
Right. And there's multiple ways, Michelle, of you hear digital touchless menus everywhere. What we try and drive with our suppliers and with our customers is that we're able to extract insights from that data. So if there's a menu change, it has to go through our sales rep to where if we, have a drink that's placed and what have you, we know if a drink is coming off and what have you, but the analytics is key to this because we're able to see how many downloads at what time of day, what menu was looked at. So when we're building and we're building LTOs for the future, we can say, hey, we're doing a wine by the glass. When was the wine menu mostly viewed? When was, our Saturday and Sundays, was the brunch menu, cocktail menu viewed the most? Do we want to go after that business? So analytics on what time are consumers looking at the menu? When are they? The analytics is a key part to when we build these spot menus with our analytics is right now. We're a big data world right now.
Which is wonderful in the way that we're able to serve all of our customers better with that data for sure. And it's interesting as you talk about availability, and Dale, maybe you can talk to this too. Somebody was asking about whether or not there are trends that you see going down just because of availability being impacted. So either that on-premise not carrying a different variety because they're trying to manage their inventory because of the threat of closures, or anything different from that perspective.
in my view, and I'll let Slide go. I think, I don't think it will be very much about them eliminating categories. I think it will be carrying fewer of a category.
Yeah.
And I'm still gonna offer my range of spirits across those. Now, the cordial area, you can go down a pretty deep well in the cordial area with what your selection looks like there. But I think, it's going to be more of, do I really need a 10th ultra premium vodka? Do I really need, so some of it's going to be, I'm absolutely going to carry that. I'm just not going to carry as many. How long does it sit there? And I do think Sly's comment on analytics, if you have that digital menu, you're going to understand it a lot better. And some of it could be, boy, it seems like people are interested in it, they just didn't order it. Well, let me think about what I need to do there, because that's different than they didn't even look at it. So a lot can be done within that area.
Yeah, and I think what's key is, we always have to be thinking about what's ahead. And what might the account need? And people are asking, what's the next big thing? What are they going to be looking for? But we also need to be cognizant and aware of the here and now, and listening to what our consumers are looking for. From a national account standpoint, when I, again, speak with my corporate mixologist, Trey Jenkins, key is what are their fears, and listening to what their fears are. And one of them definitely is managing cash flow. In the beginning, it was, we have all this inventory. Why would I bring in more when we've got to get rid of this? And so, fear of bringing in, fresh product, or now we're at 20% capacity. So if we can't bring in fresh, a bag of mint might have been able to go X amount of days, fresh thyme, whatever, fresh fruits, purees. We've been cognizant of the here and now. And again, go back to relying on our non-alcoholic suppliers and saying, if you're at a 20%, capacity, you're a consumer, you're chopping, what's going to go to waste, partnering with your kitchens and making, those, items go a little bit further. It's one of the biggest fears is bringing too much in and not being able to push so much out.
Right.
We are simplifying drink menus, 1 to 2 drinks on a menu definitely should be spirit forward. Go back to your class. 1 to 2 should absolutely be batched using premium syrups and purees and what have you that you can then offer to go. And then maybe keeping with, one signature cocktail that you make fresh. But it's definitely simplified, but it's definitely understanding the fears of our customers and understanding they're just trying to manage cash flow right now.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly
what's big is all our suppliers and what we as a company want. We want to maintain our beverage listing. We want to maintain that signature cocktail on the menu. Don't let it fall off. We got to maintain it. We want to maintain the back bar, or if they have a listing, but we also want to make room and find room for incremental business or that additional. But I think the main goal for suppliers and for us is just to maintain our current listings right now.
No, that's right.
I do think, Michelle, one other thing, just we need to make sure that, I think it's important to understand that it's not just going to be the drink menu that's altered. It's everything within that restaurant's 4 walls. Their entree list is going to be, everything is going to be subject to that. So it's not as if the beverage category is going to stick out.
That's right. That's right. I do want, since we only have less than 10 minutes left, to spend a little time talking about 2021 trends, which is certainly always on everybody's mind, what the future looks like. And specifically, as we look at what those consumer trends are going to be that roll into 2021, there's questions from the group about what your takeaway is on when we're back to normal.
Ooh.
Just the easy questions, you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Start with the easy ones. 20, in my belief, 2021 my plan would be to have 2021 be largely under some sort of restriction. Yep. And that as we start heading into the back half of next year, this year, next year at this time, you might start to see something coming back. But I would not build a financial plan that had any reopening to any great extent for the full calendar year. And the vaccine, that's great, but it's going to take a long time to get that out there and get people inoculated. And then it goes back to the other thing. It's great to have a vaccine. People have to take it. that's another barrier that we're going to be facing. So it's going to be a while. And then even when we do come back, the on-premise category is still going to be under restrictions of, is it 50%? Is it 75? Is it 25? I don't know. But it's not going to be 100% back in the near future.
And I agree with that as well. And again, you're still going to have a segment of the population that's still going to be a little bit leery and what have you. So when we talk about a full recovery, I think we have to break it down into, is it a 100% full recovery where everyone's okay? So I think we need to be cognizant of that. And, you know, we've had to start strategizing. What does 2021 look like in regards to traveling to our customers that cross multiple state lines? You know, like I mentioned before, we put some strategies in place that I can't say to everybody because everyone might duplicate, how we bring Trey, you know, front and center and virtually, you know, to our customers to make sure that they are getting the story on why this cocktail, why this brand, why this flavor, this is what it should look like and what have you. But, you know, when we're talking about trends, I definitely think we just need to be, you know, be expectant. I think ghost kitchens are going to play a big part. I know, you know, topic of conversation. And from a beverage standpoint, how can we influence those ghost kitchens and play a big role in that? Because I think that'll be huge. I definitely think virtual experiences will be big and continue to grow. I think cocktails to go. I think people need to start taking a look at different to go vessels and options and building robust and making sure that there is a game plan. How are you marketing it? To cocktails to go, definitely a trend. It's not going to work if you say we're going to do a cocktail to go, but how are you marketing it? How are you making your consumers aware? How are you maintaining safety, freshness? Are you labeling? So those are all things that we can bring to the table with our beverage marketing team. I think premiumization will still be key in 2021. As we all know, people are spending a little bit more. It'll continue and it'll go on premise as people decide when to go back. That'll dictate. And I think better for you fresh ingredients as well will play a big key in 2021 as well and roll into it.
Yeah, and actually that's something that people are wondering about that we haven't really touched on too much, which is the trends that we're seeing with low or no ABV. So healthy, better for you. Dale, do you have any insight there that you want to offer?
Yeah, certainly, and I do think that there's a segment of the population that wellness has spiked during this pandemic, and wellness has taken on new importance. That's going to lead to analyzing ingredients. It's going to more label reading, all of those things. So I do think that you're going to see room there. Those categories are growing. As long as you deliver on taste, as long as you deliver on the promise, you're going to be fine doing that. But yeah, I think that that's a trend that will continue and will grow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing and you kind of touched on it with ghost kitchens a little bit, Sly, but I think this would be the first webinar I've done with this where we haven't talked about the digital acquisition of product. And that is definitely something that spiked, and the pandemic accelerated that at warp speed. And that's something that's going to stick, and that's going to play into ghost kitchens. That's going to play into to-go food. That's going to play into retail. It plays into everything. And the digital acquisition, using the digital space to acquire beverage alcohol, is going to stick. It's going to be there, and that's something that's going to continue on.
Yep, just like the expectation of the cocktails as part of that delivery is going to stick. And I know that's something people would look like too. What about off-premise?
The component should be included in any program that's being built out, whether we're building programs, whether it's menus. The digital component should be built into every single program that we build out. That's huge.
Right.
Retail will remain strong. You know that, and you know what these numbers absolutely prove. This category is resilient. Always has been. I've got to believe always will be. And we've seen that the immediate switch. And I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Sly, is home, and I love the term home tender. I've gone out, I've bought the equipment. I now have all the equipment. I've built this out. I'm going to continue to use that. So I do think this idea of more cocktails in home is another trend that's going to continue. That's not necessarily good news for on-premise operators, but I do believe that that's going to be the case, and that the home experience of cocktails is elevated, and I think it's going to stick.
That's right. And actually this, I think, will be the last question, because so quickly as we knew it would, our hour has slipped away. But as we're in this virtual environment that has a little bit lacking in the interpersonal aspect of it, we think about what people crave for that on-premise experience of being there with the hospitality that's provided by everybody that's taken the time to start a bar or a restaurant to serve their community. And Sly, I think this is really a question for you that came from the audience that I thought was great. Is any tips on how to keep that wonderful hospitality and humanity in that on-premise experience when people are working so hard to remain touchless at the same time?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that phrase, the thoughtful bartender. Before this even happened, going back to, hospitality and serve, what does that mean? And customer coming first and what have you. So I think that plays right to the hands of the direction of what Behind the Bar was actually moving to. I think there's more time, it's how we're communicating safety, and you can still maintain, a great cocktail, still being knowledgeable of the brands and talking to the customer in front of you. In fact, now you have more time to spend with your customer. I mean, now you've got 2 people and then 2 people. So in all honesty, these have more time to spend with their guests, walk them flavors, walk them through the spirit, walk them through the experience, take a little bit more time and cleanliness. So we were going back to the hospitality side of cocktails, and a little bit away from the just a little bit, oh, this is a craft cocktail, and a little bit aloof and what have you. So I think it just plays in the hands, but it's still giving the consumers what they want in a manner that they want. So I think that's key. People, I think, are expecting a little bit more time, with their friends. I think gatherings will continue to grow at home. I think people are getting to know their neighbors. I know my neighbors, they were spending $128 on a gallon of margaritas, and they literally bought like 10 gallons of So they're purchasing, they're celebrating at home. So I definitely think there's opportunities, when building programs around these celebratory time periods of football's coming up, Valentine's is coming up. You're probably going to have couples night in, and it's not just going to be 2 couples. It's probably going to be 4 or 6 in your house with multiple, couples. Right. So still taking advantage of it, offering outside the box creative ideas, and still keeping the human component in there and understanding what people's concerns are, which is safety.
Right. Well, this has been absolutely terrific. Dale and Sly, thank you both so much. I felt like I was in your office conference room and you were giving me all of this fabulous, great insight. And I know that for the hundreds and hundreds of people that were on this webinar with us, they felt the same. So you can see on the screen, we've got some contact information for all of us at WSWA. If you have any specific or other follow-up questions, we're here to answer them. And again, Sly, Dale, thank you for making this really an hour very well spent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, everyone. Glad to have you here. Bye.